I'm interested though to hear your take on a team that has certainly not been a sure thing over the past few seasons, the Ravens. Now they're always competitive, they're never a bad team, but it doesn't always go their way. They'll have some playoff losses. A couple years ago, they missed the playoffs. Lamar Jackson's had some ill-timed injuries, not too severe, but kind of they linger and they kind of bring the Ravens season down. But now he's got his contract extension that he wanted, and he deserved. I think the contract extension stuff was so strange to me, and I'm honestly surprised the Ravens were the team that gave him the deal. I thought if anything, maybe a trade eventually was going to have to be worked out because the Ravens just were so standing so firm that they weren't going to do it. But I guess maybe there's just some negotiations that had to go on. So Lamar comes in, and what do they do to reward him for giving him that contract? They bring in some receiver help finally. I really do think they have improved the wide receiver room tremendously. Even if there's some questions still, it's still better than what it's been the past few seasons. New offensive coordinator in Todd Monken. So coming over from Georgia, University of Georgia. So what's your outlook on this offense? Because I think they're going to be good. I'm buying what they're doing.
No, I definitely agree. I think especially bringing in the coach from Georgia, I think is huge because Georgia, what we've seen is one of the most consistent, just like offensive presences in football in general. And that's kind of what was the big issue with, Greg Roman's offense was that it was very inconsistent and it was really lackluster at times. And it just didn't make sense sometimes with the routes they were making receivers run. And you have to play your player strengths. You can't just try to fit them in holes that they don't necessarily fit in. And I do agree with you. I like that they brought in receiver help. I think the one issue though is that two of their starting three receivers have a bit of an injury history with Beckham and Bateman.
Mhm.
But when they're healthy, they're still pretty good. Zay Flowers, I'm a big Zay Flowers believer. I really like what he can bring. I like how shifty he is. Really good, off ball movements and like after the catch. So I think that's going to be really helpful. And I think he's going to be really helpful for Lamar. When plays break down, I think Zay Flowers is going to see a lot of targets. I think the whole like Lamar Jackson, QB contract thing was very strange as well. But it's best that they got it figured out because it'd be a shame if they had to restart and find a new quarterback when they didn't need one. They had Lamar.
Right.
So
They had an MVP quarterback on the roster and they were just dragging their feet with it. Yeah, I agree with Zay Flowers. I'm not once again, I haven't watched a ton of film, but just the fact that he was putting up those numbers at Boston College where you go from I honestly don't know who their quarterback was to Lamar Jackson in the NFL. Plus you got guys like Odell Beckham, Mark Andrews to take that pressure off you as a rookie.
mhm.
I think he's going to be great. And I think he's
Yeah.
going to be their wide receiver one by maybe a year from now.
Hmm.
Mark Andrews is Mark Andrews. I have no reason to question it. I think it is interesting though. One thing I read up on Todd Monken, you look at Georgia's offense, especially last season, they had Bowers and Darnell Washington. Little two tight end set in college is something Monken really like to do. You have Isaiah Likely as well, who looked pretty solid as a rookie. Even Charlie Kolar. I call him Charlie Culture because I had him on my dynasty team. I think these two tight end sets are only going to increase for the Ravens under Monken. And not only is that going to help guys like Lamar and the running backs because you're going to have tight ends out there blocking a lot, but also you got these two, and Likely and especially Andrews, these two huge guys who can catch the ball, use that size to their advantage. I don't know. I just think even Bateman, I think, has shown flashes, and we know what Odell Beckham can do if he's healthy. I think they just have a ton of options, and even depth wise, Duvernay's their fifth receiver now. They have Aguilar, who say what you will, has been around for a while, at least as a veteran. So I just think they have depth and they have talent at the top, and I think they're gonna be over 500 and probably even make the playoffs.
No, definitely. I think it was kind of interesting you mentioned the whole Andrews likely thing and Kolar too to some extent. I didn't even think about that, but it kind of goes to show like what they're doing with the receivers. They've got a lot of speed type guys, a lot of guys who can stretch the field. They're shifty, and then like you're saying, they're probably going to use a lot of two tight end sets because you just got two big targets you can throw it to. And I agree, it just gives them a lot of options with what they can do offensively and get more creative, which is I think what works best with Lamar Jackson's skill set. He's a guy who can make a play even when things break down. So by having so many different options available to him, I think that's huge. And we didn't even mention really the running backs. They still have J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. He's had injuries the past few years, but he's come back. Gus Edwards is very solid running back. Even Justice Hill, to an extent, wasn't too bad. So I think I agree with you. I think their offense is going to be killer. I think really it comes down to some of the offensive line changes they made and how their defense plays, especially.
Yeah, I think just on Dobbins real fast, he's really good when he came back after
Hmm.
injury in down the stretch last year, but now he's on the pup list again. I just don't know what to expect from him, but I think it's good that when you have Lamar running out of the backfield, you have Edwards, who's a veteran, and they have all these options. I really do think, even if Dobbins can't fulfill that potential, I think they're going to be all right. You mentioned the O line. Real fast though, do you have any thoughts on Odell? I feel like we have to talk about him a little. He's on the 1 year deal. He tore his ACL in the Super Bowl. He was really good on the Rams after he got traded there. So it looked like he just needed to get back to an offense that had an above average quarterback. I know he kind of drug his feet signing last season. Do you think who do you think he's going to walk on and just be their number one receiver? Do you think Zay Flowers maybe will do that? I just think when you're paying a guy up to 15 million, even if it's a 1 year deal, I think they have expectations for him to be a high contributor. And I don't know. I actually like Odell Beckham. A lot of people don't, but I've always kind of been a fan. So what do you think?
No, I think a lot of people don't like him because there's a lot of media circus around him, and sometimes it is his fault. Sometimes it's just because people like to blow things out of proportion. I do think Odell should be their number one wide receiver because he's easily the most proven out of anyone on here. Zay Flowers, I think, has the potential to be better than I don't know about like Prime Odell because Prime Odell is a
Well,
unique
yeah, that's pretty
prime
incredible.
football player. He's unique in his own way, but Zay Flowers, I think, definitely has a potential to overtake him as the number one option at some point this season, possibly even. But Odell definitely should be their number one because he's by far the most proven player they have, and he's just people forget that he was really good in his prime just because of all the injuries and all of the like drama that's come with him recently. But he was a top three guy at one point. A lot of people consider him the best at some point. So I think Odell should come in and very clearly be the number one. But I think it also kind of depends on how he comes back from the injury and how he's picking up the offense because Rashad Bateman, he's been there for a few years now. So he could push him for that, but I think Odell should be considered the number one, and I think it'd be kind of weird if he wasn't.
Yeah, I think that's fair. As long as he's recovered from his injury, I think he'll at least have a high level role in this offense. So you mentioned the offensive line. It's weird. I think it's kind of the lesser known names on this O line. I feel like have performed the best. Like Zeitler and Moses were pretty solid last season. Patrick McCarry filled in for Ronnie Stanley last season. He was pretty solid. Linderbaum, the rookie center last year, he's very highly touted rookie, and he did get the job done as a rookie. So right
Hmm.
now it's really just on that left side. I think the questions are because Ronnie Stanley, this was a first team All Pro tackle the year Lamar Jackson won MVP, and he's been nothing but snake bit with injuries since. And they're going to hope that this is the year he gets healthy. But if he doesn't, that's going to be a concern. They're paying him a lot of money. And then they have a fifth round pick in, I'm honestly not sure how to say this guy's name, but I'll try Malasela Umave Lalu. Fifth round rookie guard is currently projected by ESPN to be the starting left guard. Now, maybe Makari plays guard this season, but I don't know. That left side isn't looking too encouraging, all things considered.
Yeah, especially because like that's like his blind side, Lamar's
Right.
blind side. So I think the biggest as good as Ronnie Stanley is, it's like you mentioned, it's the injuries. He's great, but you can't count on him until you know he's fully healthy because unfortunately he's just been very up and down with that. And that's not his fault. It's unfair to him, but he's really good when he does play. So if he doesn't get injured, then I think it's not really going to be a huge issue. Um, and as for the rookie starting at left guard, I don't know if it's maybe because like they just have no one else, or maybe that he's just really that good.
Yeah.
But I think he's kind of the biggest X factor because Ronnie Stanley, it's more about his injury. If he's healthy, he should be good. It's I think the biggest issue is the left guard, but it seems that they have a lot of faith in him, so maybe that speaks volumes to his play. So
Yeah, I maybe he's just come in and earned the job. So I guess we'll have to see. We'll have to see how the Ravens team thinks of his performance. So looking at their defense now, once again, I think they've improved it a lot recently. You start with the Roquan Smith trade at the deadline last season. That's one of the best inside linebackers in the league. He can do pretty much anything from that position. Patrick Queen got a lot better as he's gotten a little older here. Their D line is kind of it doesn't blow you away, but I feel like all the guys on that D line are pretty much there to just provide run stopping support. They're not really asking those guys to be elite. So I don't really know if that's an excuse or if that's a criticism. I'm not really sure, but I don't know. That's kind of how the Ravens have run that D line for a while now. So they kind of rely on the linebackers and the edge rushers there. Adafe Owe, former Penn State guy, Tyus Bowser as well, two outside linebackers. I feel like I don't know. I just feel like they need to prove it this year, so to speak. Tyus Bowser was injured last year, so we'll have to see. And then the secondary, I think, is pretty good for the most part. So what's your outlook on the defense here?
I would say I pretty much agree with everything you said. Their D line, it's nothing like spectacular, but that's never really been like they're not trying to, have like an Aaron Donald type player because that's not really what they need. Like you were saying, it's the edge rushers. And I agree, Owe and Bowser, especially. Bowser, he has injuries, so hopefully if he comes back, he should be better. But Owe really needs to step it up because he was drafted, I believe he was a second round draft pick the year they drafted him.
Yeah.
So they're expecting a lot out of him, and hopefully he can take this leap. So it kind of depends on them. I think Queen and Smith as their inside linebackers is an incredible duo. Probably one of the better inside linebacking duos in the league right now. So I do agree it comes down to their edge rushers. And I do like their starting secondary. I think Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton is a really good, strong duo if Kyle Hamilton continues to really improve, especially on his coverage skills. I think the bigger concern for me personally would be like Rocky Sims starting as one of their corners because he's kind of had like a really inconsistent career.
Yeah.
Um, and he's also like kind of injured right now as well. So it's kind of like up and down with that. So
Yeah, I was gonna lay into him, but then I looked at his season last year with Vegas. He was better than I thought he was. But as you said, he's kind of been inconsistent. He was pretty highly touted as a rookie. I don't think he was a first round pick, but I know the Colts had high expectations for him. So I don't know. This Ravens defense has produced pretty solid players out of the secondary. So maybe playing off Marlon Humphrey, who was awesome last year, had one of the better years of his career. Maybe that's going to help him. I feel like someone's missing from the secondary. I know Marcus Peters is gone, but I feel like didn't they have even another guy? I don't know. I was looking at the depth chart. I feel like someone is missing that used to be there, but I don't know. I still like Marlon Humphrey and those safeties a lot.
I wouldn't hit the panic button, but I think there should be some caution with the secondary because I think the secondary is not as strong as some people would like it to be.
Yeah. I think a lot of the time secondary, we've kind of laid into a lot of secondaries of these teams that we think are contenders. And also since the Dolphins episode, we saw Ramsey get injured for you, so that kind of changes the puzzle. I still think that Dolphins defense is good. But I don't know. I think maybe part of it is just because there's so many great offenses in the AFC that it's hard to measure up. But at the same time, I think it's fair to ask questions. I don't think saying Rocky Yassine's going to have some trouble with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase is the craziest thing in the world.
Yeah, no, especially just because depth is so important nowadays in the NFL with how many injuries continue to keep piling up. Like there's been a lot already this preseason, just like injuries, like you're saying, Ramsey, even Cam Smith, the other guy we drafted, who was for now was slotted into the starting spot. He's out, I think, 2 weeks with a shoulder injury. Thankfully, it's nothing too serious and he's going to come back just fine. But now we're down another starting cornerback. So I think it's totally valid to kind of lay into the depth because that's really where teams get tested late in the season when like injuries start to pile up and players aren't back yet for the playoffs because a lot of players they don't come back until the playoffs if their team make the playoffs because they're needed for that push. They need to make sure they're healthy. So depth is super important. So it makes sense to kind of talk about it a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And so it'll be interesting to see how that secondary measures up. The one thing about the Ravens that I do love though is their special teams is lights out and they don't have to worry about it ever. I mean, you got Justin Tucker, who might wind up being the best kicker in league history. Jordan Stout, former Penn State punter, was pretty awesome as a rookie. And then Duvernay is super fast and a really good returner, former all pro returner. So I think they're completely set, and that's going to help them, especially come playoff time when every little play matters. I think that's going to help.
Mhm.
So do you think the Ravens, before we get into these last two teams, do you have a playoff outlook for them, or do you think it's going to be more of a fight just because of the AFC is so deep?
I would say I wouldn't be surprised if they make the playoffs, but I think they're definitely strongly in the fighting for a wild card spot, just because I think the AFC is definitely the more loaded division in terms of just offensive firepower, compared to the NFC. So I think that's kind of where the trouble is, not because they're not good, just because there's just so many other teams who are a bit better rounded, I would say personally. So I think that's their biggest issue. But if things go well for them, they could easily get a wild card spot. And I wouldn't like be like, oh, that's crazy. I can't believe they did that.